So nice to see y'all. I've seen a few of you before. I'm Keegan Tierney. I live in Starksboro. I'll be your moderator for tonight. I just moderated Starksboro's town meeting yesterday, day before yesterday, Saturday, day before yesterday. Yep. And have just been overjoyed to be your moderator here at this super spicy school board meeting for the last couple of years, and guess we'll do it again. So we're gonna get this thing started. I'm gonna run through some preliminaries and then we'll dive into the action. This is the annual meeting of the legal voters of the Mount Abraham Unified School District, consisting of the towns of Bristol, Moncton, New Haven, and Starksboro, who have been notified and warned to meet in person here tonight, March 3rd at 4:30, to consider and act upon Articles 1 through 9 on the warning and to discuss the articles to be voted by Australian ballot, Articles 10 through 12. Legal voters who are here on Zoom, you folks up on the screens, may participate in discussion, but may not vote or act upon any business tonight. Legal voters were notified and warned that Articles 10 through 12 should take place, shall take place by Australian ballot tomorrow, March 4th, from 7 to 7 at the respective polling places in each town. Now, do folks want a primer on Robert's rules, or do we want to skip all that business and just get into the agenda that was warned? Raise your hand if you want to hear a lot about Robert's rules. Okay, then if it pleases the body, we will skip most of that and dive right in to Article 1. To elect a moderator who shall assume office immediately and serve a one-year term or until the election of a qualification of a successor. So I need a motion to bring that to the floor.
So moved.
From this corner somewhere.
Yeah.
Kathy, and a second? Second.
Moratorium.
Article 1, to elect a moderator who shall assume office immediately and serve a one-year term or until the election and qualification of a successor. I'm happy to be nominated if somebody would like to nominate me.
Still nominated,
Is there any other nominations?
and thank you for serving.
Indeed. No other nominations? You sure? Okay. Article 1 to,
second that?
let's see, we had a nomination. Do we need a second? You want a second? Oh, and I should have asked beforehand, is everybody a legal voter in the district? Great.
Well, point of order, they need to state their name and the town from which they.
Very good. Thank you, Kathy.
Charlotte and Fred.
Starksboro. So we had a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Had a motion and then a nomination at the second.
Yep. Any discussion on the nomination? Do we get a second nomination? What else do we need to do here?
Thank you.
No other nominations. We just need to vote on this thing, right?
Yeah, before you run away.
Although, let's see, nominations, no other nominations. So I think we are electing a moderator here. All those in favor of electing me as the moderator, because I'm doing such an awesome job already, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Here's the ayes have it, and I will be serving as your moderator. Moving on to Article 2, to elect a clerk who shall assume offices on July 1, 2025, and serve a one-year term or until the election and qualification of a successor. Is there a motion to bring Article 2 to the floor?
So moved. Meredith Rossett, Bristol.
Meredith Bristol, is there a second?
Valley, Starksboro.
Article 2, to elect a clerk who shall assume office on July 1, 2025, and serve a one-year term or until the election and qualification of a successor. Discussion and or nominations on Article 2.
I have both. So my first question is, why do you start now and why does the rest of the officers start in July?
It's an excellent question. Does anybody in the room know why I start every night at this time and the clerk doesn't start till July?
That was information we received, so I guess first permission, I'm not a resident of the district.
Yep, I gotta remember my terminology, my favorite line here. If there is no objection, we will let Patrick speak, even though he's not a resident of MAUSD.
I think you need 2/3 vote, but yes, let's vote on that.
I can actually do it by unanimous consent, which is what I just did. So if nobody objects, but if you're objecting and you want to vote, we could do that.
Just make sure
Okay.
that you really know what you're doing so that we can all
I
tell you
do,
what to
I do when I prepare, but I didn't prepare for this one because I forgot. And I thought it was gonna be a smaller crowd than this. So I can do it by unanimous consent unless you object, and then we have to have a 2/3 vote.
That's-
Okay, Patrick, go ahead.
So advice we received from legal counsel was that the moderator can be elected until a successor. And the other two served 1-year terms. So the clerk and the treasurer were specific 1-year terms from July 1 through June 30.
And why July and not tonight?
So this will talk.
It's a fiscal year.
Fiscal year thing?
So when was that changed?
That was advice we got, was it last year, Jennifer? You pulled up the email.
January 24th, 2020, and it's under Title 16, Section 706K.
Awesome.
Good
So
job,
I think
Jen.
we should nominate Jen to be the clerk because she knows what she's doing.
Okay, is there a second to that
I'll
nomination?
Chris
Okay,
Pearsall, wisdom.
any other nominations for clerk? Hearing none, all those in favor of Jen serving as clerk starting July 1, 2025, please say aye. Any opposed? Here's the ayes have it, congratulations.
Thank you, Jen.
Well, let's move us along to Article 3 to elect co-treasurers who shall assume office on July 1, 2025, and serve 1-year terms or until the election and qualification of successors. Is there a motion to bring Article 3 to the floor?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
and I don't have the names, but Meredith, Kylie. Move in second. On Article 3 to elect co-treasurers who shall assume offices on July 1, 2025, and serve 1-year terms or until the election and qualification of a successor. Is there any discussion or nominations for co-treasurers?
I came just so I could nominate everybody. I'm not Barb Torrey in New Haven. I'd like to nominate Valley Audie and Chris Pearsall.
We have a nomination for Valley and Chris. Is there a second?
I second.
Kathy seconds. Is there any other nominations? Hearing none. All those in favor of Valley and Chris serving as co-treasurers, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Here's the ayes have it. Congratulations. Let's move us along to Article 4 to establish the salaries for elected officers of the district. Is there a motion to bring Article 4 to the floor?
So moved.
So moved.
Melissa.
Melissa from Bristol,
Second. Kathy Lefkow.
Kathy from New Haven, second. Article 4 to establish the salaries for the elected officers of the district. Is there any discussion on Article 4? Got a hand online?
Oh, that's just the,
Oh, that's you. Okay, never mind.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Any discussion on Article 4?
I can offer what the current salaries are for whatever that's worth.
That'd be great. Thank you, Pat.
So currently, each board member receives $1,200, the chair $2,400. Last year, this group voted to increase the vice chair compensation to $1,800. Trustees share $7,200. Treasurer, sorry.
This week we're focusing on finding what opportunity has in seats.
There we go. A little echo. So board members 1,200, chair 24, vice chair 1,800, treasurer's share 7,200, and the moderator is $50.
That's where it's changing to.
So that is the current rate, and last year at this annual meeting, the vice chair compensation was changed from 1,200 to 1,800.
Any other discussion on Article 4? The internet, not seeing any?
Barb Torrey, New Haven. So you, the board, you do a lot of work. Do you feel like you're compensated well enough for all your volunteerism?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I signed up not even knowing there was.
Yes,
It's cheap as the compensation the same.
Okay, I'll second. Any other discussion? So was that a motion and a second? Keep it the same?
Yep.
Did I catch that correctly? Very good. So I think we can vote on that motion. All those in favor of keeping salaries the same, please say aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, it appears that the ayes have it and salaries for elected officers will be kept the same as last year. Article 5, to authorize the district board of directors to borrow money by the issuance of bonds or notes not in excess of anticipated revenues for the fiscal year 2025-2026 per 16 VSA 5629. Is there a motion to bring Article 5 to the floor? Come on, folks.
So moved.
Is that you?
Yeah.
Justin, great. Anybody else?
I'll second.
Second, how about a second from Mike?
Yeah.
On Article 5, to authorize the district board of directors to borrow money by the issuance of bonds or notes not in excess of anticipated revenues for the fiscal year 2025-2026 per 16 VSA 5629. Is there any discussion on Article 5?
You kind of have to do it to keep things moving.
So we need money to grease the skids. Is there any other discussion on Article 5? This is even easier in Starksboro. Good lord. Hearing none, are we ready to vote on Article 5? It appears that we are. All those in favor of authorizing the board to borrow money, please say aye. Any opposed? Here's the ayes have it. The ayes do indeed have it. Article 6, to hear and act upon the reports of the school district directors and officers. Is there a motion to bring Article 6 to the floor?
Make a motion.
Kathy seconded.
Sarah.
Sarah from New Haven. Sarah from New Haven. And Kathy, Article 6, to hear and act upon the reports of the school district directors and officers. Is there any discussion on Article 6?
But I'm confessing, does anybody know what those reports were?
Does anybody have reports to share?
That's basically this packet.
This whole packet.
And we will get a little more into the budget when we get to that article.
Any other discussion on Article 6?
Is there anything you'd particularly like us to know? Other than what we've already read with our glasses.
With our magnifying glasses, right? I would speak for New Haven and that it's been an incredible year. It was difficult last year with multiple budgets. But never once have we sought input from our communities that we haven't received it in a respectful and honest way. And I think that's never reflected in the annual report, but I really want to stress that. And I thank every member of our communities that participate.
Any other discussion, on Article 6? Hearing none, I think we vote on this, and I'm just gonna put in a caveat here as moderator. We should revisit this article next year so that it's more clear on what we're supposed to do. So all those in favor of closing out discussion, and I don't believe there's any action on the reports, please say aye. Any opposed? Okay. Article 7. To discuss articles to be voted by Australian ballot, Articles 10 through 12. Is there a motion to bring Article 7 to the floor?
So
So moved. Is there a second?
okay, Kylie.
Second, Kylie. Article 7. To discuss articles to be voted by Australian ballot, Articles 10 through 12. Is there any discussion on Article 7?
There's a hand.
Yes.
Can you
Online,
please, can you please tell us what those articles are?
Sure can. You want me to read them all?
Please do.
Articles 10 through 12. Article 10. These are all to be voted on by Australian ballot on March 4th, 2025. Article 10, shall the League of Voters of the Mount Abraham Unified School District authorize the school board of directors to transfer an amount not to exceed $1,040,000 from the current funds contained within the capital reserve fund into the general fund to pay for expenses to be incurred as part of the Mount Abraham Union High School roof replacement project. The balance of the capital reserve fund, not including fiscal year 24 balance as of June 30, 2024, was $1,771,800. That's Article 10. Article 11, shall the voters of the Mount Abraham Unified School District authorize the school board of directors to deposit $819,990 of the district's audited fund balance from the fiscal year 2024 into the capital reserve fund. The total audited fund balance from fiscal year 2024 as of June 30, 2024 is $819,990. And Article 12, shall the voters of the school district approve the school board to expend $34,894,443, which is the amount the school board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year. The Mount Abraham Unified School District estimates that this proposed budget, if approved, will result in per pupil education spending of $14,628.31, which is 2.11% higher than per pupil education spending for the current year. Any other discussion? Article 7.
I know. How is what's going on federally directed towards Vermont going to affect that item? Number 12, that just.
The question is, are there any impacts that we foresee from the federal government shenanigans on Article 12?
I can speak to that sort of broadly. So we do have some positions that are more positions that are partially funded by federal funds than fully. So if we lost federal funds, then this budget wouldn't cover all of the positions that we currently have. So we would have to, that would be a very difficult thing to navigate.
Could you tell us how much money we would need to cover those positions?
I don't have that in front of me right now. I don't know if that's something you get your hands on. I'm almost right off the way.
So are you working up a tentative plan? Because it's pretty likely that we're gonna get hit.
I can share broken down, which would allow you the ability to discern whether or not you think these are items that are greater at risk or not. Our food service budget, which comes from the USDA for food reimbursement for our school lunches, is 80,000 for USDA food commodities and a federal and state reimbursement of 1.1 million. I'm looking at less than 260,000 coming from the state of that 1.1 million. Next is the IDEA B grant. That is fully federally funded at $783,000. Most of that is for occupational therapy, speech services, PT services, behavior services, most of it having to do with our special ed portion of our budget. The Title I Consolidated Federal Program for $326,000. Title II for $86,000. Title IV for $110,000. The Triple E grant, which is pre-K, is $116,000. We receive a grant for our mentor program. The transfer from the Medicaid is $14,000 of that revenue. MAUSD Medicaid grant is $47,000. And we received for our expanded learning program a 21st century grant of $188,000, $189,000 rounded. And there are no ARP ESSER funds still in this in this next budget year. We had liquidated, closed all of the RFSs. Any questions on any of those?
Yeah. The grants, are those all federal grants?
Those are the pieces that are federal grants. We do have some state grants as well. I mean, the education grant as a whole is one. So those are federal grants, most of them aimed at specific areas that we haven't seen anything across the state where there's a concern that these are funds that are being targeted currently on the federal level.
Thanks.
And in terms of the backup plan, as you can see, it's a individually large sums of money, collectively a very large sum of money. So to come up with a contingency plan that addresses that would be devastating. So we'd be, honestly, if worst case scenario, these all got wiped out, we would have to look at what are we, so thinking about facility spending, like we look at all of our spending and say, well, that's not happening this year. We'd have to look at reserve funds that we have and what we might be able to apply to offset any loss of revenue. So it'd be a whole series of things we'd have to look at to adjust accordingly.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful.
Further discussion on Article 7, looks like online, Nod?
So we don't have a backup plan, right? I mean, we're dangerously close to losing federal income. And if that goes away, it's going to be awful for either the taxpayers are going to have to absorb that amount of money, or we're going to have to cut the budget really, really down low, which we don't want to do. So we got to be really careful of what we're doing right now. I'm just saying, in order to, I think we need another article in the budget that or in the voting that says, if the federal funding goes away, we have this backup plan. And right now, we do not have a backup plan.
I think that's true, and I also think that there is no school in the state of Vermont that is prepared for anything of this magnitude. When you're talking about $2.75 million. There's no way that any school could recoup that. So the best bet is for you to be loud and proud with your voice, with anybody in Washington and anybody in Montpelier.
Recognize it's not a state of Vermont issue. Right, these programs are national. And there's been no discussion on a national stage to eliminate these programs. There's certainly a lot of brouhaha about eliminating items on the national stage. None of these are in that discussion point.
So aren't those mandated by law, many of these?
I would say that those titles are absolutely mandated. We have to provide those items. And so reflect that out. We have to provide them, meaning that as a society, we need to provide them, meaning on a federal level. That's most likely why we're not seeing movement in these areas. Because there's no opportunity there to cut, because it has to be spent for these particular items.
Thanks.
Any other discussion, Article 7?
I think Nod came back.
Nod, is that a new hand?
Yeah, I understand all that. I'm just saying we have to have a backup plan, because if this happens, I mean, think about your neighbor down the road. They can't pay the taxes. The people that have retired, they can't pay their taxes. I know my neighbor down that has a mini farm right next to me has defaulted on their taxes. And if if the federal income tax goes away, we need to have a backup plan. We have to have it.
We would have to rewarn the whole part of the budget for another vote.
Exactly. That's what we need to do. We need to have
Well, we
a
can't,
backup plan.
well, that would be the backup plan is to have, we'd have to have a meeting to discuss it. And then another, it would have to be warned according to the state law.
No, we need to have a backup plan right now. If the federal income gets cut off, this is our backup plan.
Well, I think it would be against the law because federal funds are granted by the US government.
I think for the sake of tonight's meeting, we can only act upon what's been legally warned on the articles that we're all looking at. I think what I'm hearing is a suggestion from folks online that we think about a backup plan and get one in place as soon
Well,
as
I think
possible.
we
And
need
that,
to. We don't need to worry about it now, but we will need.
thank you, Alan.
No, I think we need to have, if this happens, the backup plan comes into effect immediately.
Duly noted. Thank you, Nod.
So I think it's clear that the superintendent's union has already been working on this and they have all the numbers. And that they are aware that this is a possibility and that it is in our best interest to go ahead and vote whether you think this is a good budget or a bad budget without any exterior noise, because this would be the top line. If it's less than this, then that's up to them to make it happen. But we don't necessarily have a say in it being less than this at this moment. And they're clearly aware of the situation and are doing their best to deal with it, just like all other school districts will be doing.
I would just add to that, that since there are federal laws about those items, chances are they get hung up in court and we have some time.
I think it's the responsibility of the superintendent at some time later, if this becomes reality, to come up with a backup plan.
Anybody that hasn't spoken on Article 7 that would like to speak?
Just want to give a bit of background if people want it.
Yeah, maybe on each of the three.
I can certainly have slides for the budget, but I'm happy to talk to the other ones.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to just talk briefly to the other two, and then I'll pull up the presentation. We can dig deeper into the budget.
Yeah, perfect. So I'm happy to kind of give a little bit of top level overview of kind of.
I'm sorry, I can't.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'll speak up. That's my fault. Yes. I'm happy to give kind of a top level overview, better, of the articles that we'll be voting on tomorrow. Just to provide a little bit more background and sort of perspective from how we got to where we are, that those showed up for the vote for tomorrow. And so a lot of this will be kind of rehashed from previous board meetings or public engagement, community presentations. So bear with me if you've seen this before, but for those who haven't, I think it's a way that you can go and spread some information about what we'll be voting on tomorrow. So the two somewhat interrelated ballot or articles, Article 10 and Article 11, speak to both the use and the replenishment of capital reserve funds. So we have a sort of interesting confluence of events this year where we know we have some pretty major capital improvement needs in the district, most notably the roof right here. And it's an expensive project. I think we have some estimates out in the ballpark of 1.8 to 2 million, give or take, depending on options and what the timeline ultimately is. But it's something that needs to be addressed. Our independent assessment from Truex Collins, the architects who looked at all the facilities throughout the district, indicated that this was a priority fix, which we knew already. So to try to address that, Article 10 asks that we, as the electorate, authorize the use of a little over $1 million, $1.04 million, that we would pull from the current capital reserves to be able to use over the ensuing year to help pay for the roof improvement. To pull money from that capital reserve fund, which we have already in place, that requires a vote of the electorate. So that's why that shows up as Article 10. Interrelated, we have a fund balance from the, not this year, but the previous years, that's now been fully audited. This is a fund balance of $819,990. So these were funds that were allocated in a previous budget that then were unspent, right? For a variety of reasons, maybe positions that weren't filled or construction costs that weren't used. And so what that Article 11 asks is that we apply as a community that fund balance, all $819,990 back into the capital reserve fund, essentially offsetting the money that we're asking to use for the roof. A little bit less, but sort of apples to apples in that sense. It might seem a little bit weird for us as a board to ask the community to both take money out of the capital reserve and then put it right back in. But I promise it's no real shell game, or at least no intentional shell game, other than to say there are state laws that implement taxes on reserve funds that have sat for more than 5 years. So essentially, by taking money out and then replacing it with new funds, we reset that time window so that we as an electorate are not subject to tax on the money that was sitting in those funds. So essentially, combined, these articles allow us to access funds to pay for the pressing roof needs at Mount Abe, but also replenish the capital reserve fund almost to where it was. I think you end up at about $200,000 less than where we sit right now, so that we have reserve funds to help pay for pressing capital needs down the road. So that's the sort of broad summary of Articles 10 and 11. I'll pause if there's questions for me or others on the board. Perfect. I hope that's clear. Thank you.
Nice job.
Thanks, Mike.
Sure. And then I did put together a handful of slides, again, just as a sort of primer on the proposed budget, and how we got to this point and sort of why the budget number is what's being proposed, what we're asking you all to vote on tomorrow. And again, this is sort of cribbed from a previous presentation that I gave at a community engagement event, but I've condensed it considerably because I know we all have town meetings to get to and the likes. So I will do my best to be brief, for sure. Patrick, there's like a lot of just like stepwise animation, so feel free to just click when it seems reasonable. So this should maybe look familiar based on the budget flyer that I hope you all received and kind of gave you the overview of the budget as well as those articles. But this is just a sort of top line of the numbers. You can see that our proposed total expenses, as was read in the article, are $34,894,443. And I think it's worth pointing out that that represents an almost $500,000 reduction in spending from the current budget. And we'll talk to how we got to that place. Revenues are down in large part because we used money from the Education Reserve Fund last year to help offset taxes in the contentious budget votes. We're not doing that again this year. That was $300,000 of perceived revenue since we took that money from our reserves and used them. When you combine the expenses plus that change in revenue, you get that total educational spending of a little over $28 million, which ultimately reflects a slight reduction year over year from the current budget. We have an updated version of our long-term weighted average. This is the adjusted pupil count. It takes into account the number of students plus any particular needs that individual students might have. So things like English as a second language, socioeconomic status, that the state might weight more heavily based on the amount of funds that it might be perceived to educate those individuals. We had a reduction of almost 43 adjusted pupils. There's a 2.6% reduction. Again, that's just who's in our schools at the time. And the reason why I bring this up is ultimately the only thing that we as a local board control and the thing that drives directly towards your tax rate is the per pupil spending. So per pupil spending, as evident on this chart, is simply our educational spending, that $28 million number, divided by our adjusted pupil count. And that gets us to our about $14,628 of spending per pupil. This ultimately is a slight increase from last year, 2% increase, again, reflecting essentially stable spending or level spending, but a reduction in pupils, giving rise to an increase in the amount of spending per pupil. Comfortable? Okay, great, thanks, Patrick. So what I want to do in the remaining 5 or 6 minutes here, oh, sorry, just one, oh, there's a little line on there if you go back one, is I just want to try to help address 2 straightforward questions. How do we get to these numbers? And what does this budget actually provide for our district, right? In the end, that's what this is all about. So we want to give a little perspective of how we come to those numbers, but also why we end and ask you all to vote on that particular budget. Thanks, Patrick. So just to give a quick overview of this process, the initial budget development really starts with our administration, and they start with the current budget and really went line by line, looking at the budget from last year, but also the actuals. What did we spend? Trying to find areas where there might be discrepancies, areas where we maybe need to increase the budget to meet increased costs, or areas where we thought we'd have to spend more, and actually there was unspent funds. After they kind of have a sense of where we are in the current budget, the administration typically identifies new constraints. And just to skip ahead, this ultimately gave rise to about $2 million, give or take, of increased costs. And you can think about that as either actual costs, or if there are reductions in revenue or pupils, those kind of tie into that increased need when we think about the tax rate at the end. What do these constraints look like? These can be legislative changes, so a new statewide tax calculation formula. These can be year-over-year salary increases or inflation. We all know that there was almost a 12% increase in state mandated healthcare costs, again, outside of local control. Our pupil count comes into that constraint, again, rising our per pupil spending, even if we spend the same amount. We didn't use the education reserve funds. And then ultimately the statewide yield. The statewide yield, which takes into account spending across the state, will ultimately intersect with our per pupil spending to dictate our bottom line or our tax rate. So the administration takes into account these constraints and then takes a pause and says, but what do we really need? What are the wants? What are the desires? What are the needs that our district has? And how do we ensure that whatever budget we put forth takes into account the constraints while still serving the needs of our students? See the next one, Patrick, if that works. And then the administration brings this initial budget to the board. We have, I think, a pretty robust discussion about what proposed changes are made. And then typically after that discussion with the board and community members who've attended that meeting, the board tends to set a projected tax increase goal, right? So we can set a target for the administration that says, based on what we're hearing from the community, based on the historical changes, what do we want to see in the budget for this year? And this year, the board collectively instructed the administration to come up with a budget that would see no tax increase or no projected tax increase across our 4 towns, so 0% or less. With that sort of instruction, the administration goes back to the drawing board. They take into account in the discussion, community feedback, that projected tax rate. They come up with the next budget, and we kind of iteratively talk back and forth between the administration and the board and the school and the community until the board, excuse me, votes to adopt the proposed budget, which is what we see in front of us. Gotcha. So how do we get there in this particular budget? I sort of alluded to the idea that just year over year constraints represent about a $2 million increase. And at the same time, on our first slide, I showed that we're actually spending less than we did last year. So to get there, we had to cut spending. I just show you this sort of brief part of key spending areas to remind you where our allocated budget actually goes. About 71% of the budget that you're voting on will go to support directly staffing. Another 13% is buildings, so construction or maintenance of buildings. Another 5.5% is transportation, busing primarily, which means only about 10 or 11% of the budget is all of the other stuff. I point this out because when you're trying to make reductions of close to $2 million, right? Oftentimes those reductions are going to come from the areas where you're spending the majority of your funds. So Patrick, the next one will get at what those look like. And you can do one more if you don't mind. Sorry, maybe go off that one. Yeah, beautiful. Sorry, this is on me. So we reduced staffing costs by about $830,000 in the current budget relative to the previous budget. or at least we made $830,000 of reductions. It's maybe not true on the top line of staffing, because of course salaries increase year over year. How was the administration and the board able to propose a budget with this? We relied on largely attrition, so 7 unfilled positions that were allocated in the current budget, but that we were unable to hire an individual to fill that position for the entirety of this year, as well as 1 retirement. So an individual who retired, taking advantage of that open position to ultimately give rise to about $800,000 of reduced staffing costs. If you want specifics on that, those are listed there, but it's merging 2 administrative assistants in the central office into a single position. The 6 professional staff positions that were in the budget but were unallocated include a social emotional learning coach and some interventionists as well as a school-based clinician. And then the current budget proposes eliminating 1 K-6 teacher position across the district, which is the result of our retirement. There's still, we didn't add back to buildings, again, a big chunk of our spending. So last year's budget, we removed $400,000 of spending from the previous year's budget from the construction services line. We haven't added that back in this budget to try to meet that target. And then that arduous work of comparing the current budget and looking at actuals and projections and going line by line through what is it, 1,800 lines or something along those lines of budget. The administration was able to find about $600,000 of savings based on the sort of proposed budget last year, or the budget last year, and what we think we would need to spend going forward. So all told, that's how we maintain sort of level spending budget despite increases in other constraints. And I want to point out here, because I think it's really important, this is really talking just financials, but we talked about thinking about our district's needs, right, and our students' needs. And so despite cutting a decent chunk of spending, to say the least, I think it's really important to point out that these changes don't produce at present any anticipated changes to school programming or offerings. Class sizes are within the district guidelines, or at times even at the lower end of the guidelines. There were no reduction in forced notices, so all of the reductions in staff came about from attrition, so retirement, or positions that already weren't filled. And this budget does get us to the board's target of a 0 or less tax increase in each town. Okay, so to sum this up, we get back to our spending. I sort of walked you through that again, but now hopefully you have a little bit of context for how we can come to a number of $34,894,000, right? The steps that it takes to get to that point were sort of just outlined. Once we have this, if you get one more click there, Patrick, you can take that per pupil spending, that $14,000 value, that gets combined with the projected state yield. We account for the common level of appraisal, right? And all that comes together in a formula that ultimately dictates the projected impact on your taxes. And that's what the chart on the right-hand side of the screen shows. It shows both the homestead rate in the current budget for each of our 4 towns, the projected homestead rate in the proposed budget. Again, this is estimated as the state yield may move, or the CLA or things along those lines. But the short of all of this is to say that we project a decrease in property taxes across the 4 towns that vary in terms of the magnitude, and you can see in green at the end what that would account to in terms of a real dollar value per $100,000 of assessed value. Maybe one more, Patrick. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of context for how we came to where we were. I tried to be brief, something I'm not very good at, so apologies if I wasn't actually brief. But we have lots more information, right? You've already received the flyer. That's available online as well. There's also detailed line by line analysis of our budget, along with comparisons from year over year. So if you want more information in advance of the vote tomorrow, I highly encourage you to just go to MAUSD.org. There's a little pop-up that comes right to the front and it'll take you directly to this, or you can navigate that awkward link that's below that. Or if you just go to the website, click on MASD, click on the school board in the top left, and then budget information. Full details of this budget, the budget process are all available for you to engage with. That's perfect.
You good?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I should have done something a while ago, so yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Any other discussion on Article 7?
You said unable to fill positions. So none of them are just arbitrarily forgotten. You're trying to advertise.
Yeah, my understanding is that these were all advertised, they were sought after, but we, along with many other districts, are facing challenges in finding individuals who are applying for these positions.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And those were actually positions that have been in the budget for multiple years, not just last year, so they've been unfilled for multiple years. Yeah, it's been a challenge in that area.
Thank you.
Thanks for the clarification.
Any other discussion? Nod?
Can I ask a question from the Zoom?
Sure.
Oops, probably a good idea if you could see me. And let's see if you can see me. Hi, my name is Cindy Brisson, and I'm here today. This is my return to Bristol. Hi, Elizabeth, from way back when. Yeah, good to see you. I have a couple of questions. One is how much of this budget, I haven't gone through the line by line, but my guess is that I didn't see your name there. You're the Zoom MAUSD person, the guy who was just presenting. You probably know the lines pretty clear. How much of this budget is for the district office? What's the percentage?
Yeah, it looks like sort of top level, the central office is about $1.8 million. So as a percentage of the total budget, it's that about 5%,
Okay,
give or take. So quick back of the envelope math, but
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And how much money is Mount Abe anticipating getting from the state education funds?
in what
Because they're
capacity?
looking at changing things, so I'm just kind of curious, but as a percentage.
So that would be all of
Was
the,
it-
all of the ed spending is what we would expect from the education fund. And
Could you
the
say-
changes that are being proposed wouldn't impact that amount for next year.
You said all of
It was
something
in
there, Patrick?
The education fund, so the
Yeah, it's spending.
ed spending, sorry. I'm trying to see where I can point.
It
on-
was a little over 6 million.
Okay,
More-
and how much
It's
comes
in
from
the
the Fed?
flyer.
How much comes from the feds?
We had just talked about that 2 point something million. Kathy had that calculated.
2.75 million.
You say
It was just on the
2.754?
screen.
$2,750,000.
Alan, if you can hold your comments till this conversation's done, that would be great.
All right, yeah.
And do we have, is there any indication that some of that federal funds is gonna put us in a big tight pinch here going into the fiscal year 26 budget?
If all federal funds went away, we would definitely be in a tight pinch, to say the least.
Okay. I guess right now, because there's not much you can do about the increasing cost of health insurance, that's kind of that's something that's dictated to the district. So I don't have any other questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alan, did you have further comment?
No, but maybe I'm a little confused. It says here that there's a little over $6 million that does not come from local funding. Is that correct?
So the education spending amount, which is 28 million,
Right.
is the money that comes from Vermont's education fund.
which is so where does the additional amount come from that makes the 34 point, almost 35 million? Where is that coming?
So it's a whole series of other, so we talked about the federal grants that contribute to that, and there are additional grant funds and other revenue streams that would show up there as well. Floyd can
Do you want me to
go into
punch?
that a little bit more.
Well,
Yeah.
you don't have to, all I'm saying is that those come from federal funding. Is that correct?
I can list where that revenue stream is from, Alan. 1.7 million is tuition, most of that coming from the Lincoln secondary students. 175,000 in state support for the tech center. Reimbursement for driver's ed for 8,000. 135,000 for sped LEAs. Vocational transportation aid for 33,000.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm scrolling
I don't
down.
need you to.
Uh,
So
two
I don't
point
need you to do
2.6
that,
million
but
from the census block grant. Sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, I just wanted the people listening to know that that 6 point was not local funding. Okay?
Okay, thanks, Alan. Nah, did you have another comment or question?
Yeah, I have a question about by the way, great job with the budget. Love it. You guys deserve a high five. Awesome. The 17, when we went from 17% to about 11% on the healthcare coverage, how are you possibly able to do that? Did the staff members take a hit in their healthcare coverage? Is the community still absorbing 5,000 of their deductible? And then the other question is, what is the average percent increase of the staff members for raises? Is it still 7%?
So a lot to unpack there. So healthcare is negotiated at the state, so we don't have any local control over the healthcare costs and their increases. The district pays for 80% of the premium and employees pay for 20% of the premium. And then the out-of-pocket costs, the districts, and again, not unique to MAUSD, all districts, because it's negotiated at the state, pay the first, I'll use the Family Gold CDHP plan. There are several plans. The Family Gold CDHP is the most common plan, I think, for most districts. So using that as an example, the district pays for the first, I think, 4,000 of the $5,000 deductible for that cost. Was that? 4250. So that's how the costs are associated with the healthcare, but all of that is negotiated at the state level, not locally.
Can I jump in, Patrick? Sure. One of the things you said, Nod, was that we initially had 17% in our budget for the health insurance increase. That was being the number that was shared with us on what the state level was projecting it could be as high as. So in our initial projections, we went with 17. In the middle of December, when it came in at 11.9, we reduced it to that 11.9 increase to reflect what the actual state approved increase was for our health plan. So it wasn't anything we did to negotiate a better rate. We just took a prudent, safe positioning on what we thought it could be as high as based on the last couple of years and the indicators we were receiving from the state health plan.
And to directly answer your question in terms of employees taking a hit on their health insurance coverage, I think the short answer is no, with the caveat that when premiums go up 12%, it's 12% of the 20% that they were paying. So they are paying more for the same percentage of the premium. And the district is also paying more for the 80% that the district covers.
Yeah, I think you answered my question. In the pay raises?
So in the budget does assume 7%. That was the sort of best information we had to use at the time. We are currently negotiating with professional staff, so we don't know what that's gonna actually be for next year, which is one more variable in the world of many, many variables in budget building. But we use 7% as an estimate. We knew that 7% is the new money that had been negotiated with support staff. So we applied that for all staff.
All right, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you, Nod. Any other discussion on Article 7? Seeing none, I don't believe we need a vote on this one because all these things get voted tomorrow. So moving us along to Article 8, to transact any other business which may legally come before this meeting. Is there a motion to bring Article 8 to the floor? Second? Second. Article 8, to transact any other business which may legally come before this meeting. Is there any discussion on Article 8?
Once again, I know it's really challenging to get people to come to these meetings, but having it on the same day as our town meeting in New Haven, which is only a little, it's really challenging for a lot of people. And if you are indeed trying to actually get people here, I don't know what happened to your previous idea of when you held your meeting, but I'm just saying that 4:30 on the same day as town meeting is challenging. And I do appreciate that it might be easier and better and all that you do, because I know that there's probably no good time, but. Put that up.
Thanks for.
Any other discussion on Article 8? Okay, seeing,
Go to adjourn.
is there a second?
Second. Bristol.
All those in favor of adjourning the meeting until 7 AM tomorrow when Australian ballot voting will happen, please say aye. Any opposed? Appears the ayes have it. I think I'll see y'all next year.
Thank you.
Coming.
Thanks, Keegan.